All right, start of the week here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. After a busy weekend, I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. Lots of content there, lots of articles, lots of updates, lots of things going on. All really a culmination of the last week or 2 weeks of recruiting, and it all came to a head over the weekend when Pitt had 4 official visitors on campus and landed 4 commitments. As of this recording, only one of them has officially announced himself to be one of the commitments. But you don't have to think too hard to figure out the 4 for 4 in this situation. And that was only like the latest thing that happened over the weekend. There was a ton of stuff. You had a significant contributing upperclassman decides that he's going to forego the Sun Bowl and enter the NFL draft. You had another basketball win closing out the non-conference season with another dominant win. A lot of things to talk about there. And then, of course, all the recruiting developments over the weekend. It's been a busy one, and we're here on the Morning Pit to talk about it right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you hit the like button on this video and hit the subscribe button right now for youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We put a lot of content, a lot of video content out on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have our weekly live show every Wednesday night, the live Panther-Lair show. We're going to be doing that for sure this week. It's National Letter of Intent signing day on Wednesday, and we'll be live Wednesday night to talk about Pitt's recruiting class and all the transfers and all the other things that go along with it. And then, of course, we have these Morning Pitt videos every day of the week, Monday through Friday, right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And if you want to make sure you never miss any of it, hit subscribe. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. Subscribe button's right down there, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And I was trying to think about where to start with this weekend. I'm not entirely sure because there were a lot of things, like I say, at least like 6 different stories to talk about. But let's start with the recruiting weekend. Let's start with the 4 new commitments, and let's start with the one who announced himself. And it's Penn State quarterback transfer, Christian Veer. That's right, Veer. Not Valu, not Valu, not Vialuix, Veer. Veer. And he's transferring in from Penn State after 2 years at State College. Ottawa native, went to high school or finished high school in Maryland at Bullis School. Committed to Penn State over offers from all over the country. I mean, he was a very good quarterback prospect. I think he was rated 3 stars, but he had a ton of offers to his name, and committed to Penn State. He played in 5 games over the course of his time at Penn State, attempted 35 passes, completed 23 of them, which is about 66%, 282 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and no interceptions. The bulk of his production came in the Rutgers game last year. Penn State beat Rutgers there. Completed 15 of 24 for 235 and 3 touchdowns. He ran the ball 10 times for 36 yards. And he comes to Pitt after, he sat behind Sean Clifford. And then it's pretty clear that Drew Aller is the future. And so as quarterbacks are wont to do when they find themselves not seeing a clear path to playing time, Veer decided to transfer. And I think Pitt emerged early as a prominent, point of focus for Veer. I think he was a top target for the Pitt staff pretty quickly after he entered the transfer portal, and I think Pitt became a top target for him once they reached out and established contact. Virginia Tech was apparently also involved, but I think Pitt was kind of the primary option from the get-go. And what they get in Christian Veer is the future. Quite simply. He's, of course, the second transfer quarterback to pick Pitt in this offseason. The other one was Phil Dracovic, former Pine Richland star, transfers in from Boston College. And Dracovic has 1 year of eligibility left. Presumably, he will be the starter for Pitt in 2023, with Veer as his backup or competing for that backup job, presumably with Nate Yarnell, assuming he returns for another season at Pitt. But Veer comes to Pitt with 3 years of eligibility remaining. So if Phil Dracovic is the starter in 2023, he's done after that. He's got no more eligibility left. Veer can then step into the starting role or compete for the starting role in 2024. And I think that's what was explained to him. You'll have a chance. If you're the best quarterback in practice right now, you'll be the starter in 2023. Most likely it's going to be Phil. And I don't know if they would say this to Veer himself, but most likely it's going to be Phil Dracovic. And then Veer will compete for, and I think the assumption is win the starting job in the spring of 2024. And then you've got your starter in place for perhaps 2 years. Mixed reviews on Veer as a player, but I think there's upside. I don't think he has scratched, the ceiling. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's got a big arm, a little bit of athleticism. And, obviously a guy, like I said, who was very coveted out of high school because of his talent and very coveted by the Pitt coaches right now, again, because of his talent. And so what you're seeing is Frank Cignetti really kind of rebuilding the quarterback room basically in the span of a couple of weeks. It was going to be Kenny Minchey coming in with the expectation, I think, of Keaton Slovis coming back. Slovis would be the quarterback in 23, and then Minchey would compete for the starting job in 2024. Well, Minchey decommitted. And so they went back to the drawing board. And they got Ty Diefenbach as a high school recruit out of California. He'll come in. They got Dracovic. And then Slovis decided he was going to transfer, right? So you lose Minchey as a decommitment. You lose Slovis as a transfer. And so they go get Ty Diefenbach to be the high school recruit in this class. They get Phil Dracovic to be the starter in 2023. And then Christian Veer to be presumably the starter in 2024. And allow Diefenbach some extra time to develop. Veer can be a long-term transfer because the transfers don't have to just be one-year deals. They don't have to be grad transfers who come in and just play 1 year. Nate Peterman played 2. Keaton Slovis could have played 2. But, they don't have to be that sort of 1-year rental player. You can bring in guys that you can have for a couple of years that you can develop over the course of their career. And, or at least what remains of it. And that's what Christian Veer is. He's a guy who can come in, learn the offense for a year, and then go on to, you would like to think, be ready to take over in 2024 and be Pitt's starter for 2 seasons. That's sort of the plan. And, now you're looking to enter spring camp. Again, assuming Nate Yarnell returns, you're looking to enter spring camp with 3 guys who were not on the roster last year. But 2 of them already have a combined 6 years of college experience. The 7 years of college experience. I think Phil Dracovic's been in college for, I think he was class of 2018. So it'll be 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. This will be his 5th year. He might have actually started in 2017, come to think of it. But either way, you got 2 guys who have been around the college game a lot. And I've talked about this before about transfers. That you would like to get those guys who have played a lot, and Dracovic has played a good amount in the last 2 years at Boston College. But it's also just something to be said for being around the college game, understanding what it takes to train in college, to study film in college, to just be a college student. How many of us had trouble making that adjustment to being a college student, living on our own, having that independence and sort of responsibility? That can take some time to get used to and to grow into. And so you bring in transfers. There are guys that even if you have a transfer who hasn't played a lot, you don't have to worry as much about that transition, the transition to college life, the transition to college student athlete life. And Veer and Dracovic both come in with that. And so Veer's only played in 5 games. He's only attempted 35 passes, but he's been in the college game for 2 years. And I think that's huge. And now he, again, if all goes according to plan, he'll have a year to learn this offense and ideally be ready to roll in 2024. So totally remade quarterback room. This is going to be one of the storylines that we talk a lot about this week, heading into signing day and coming out of signing day, is how Frank Cignetti rebuilt Pitt's quarterback room from what he inherited to what it's going to be in 2023 and beyond. Now, Veer was in town for an official visit over the weekend. He committed before the visit ended. And they had 3 other recruits in town. And given that they went 4 for 4 on commitments from the official visit, I think it's safe to assume these other 3 guys committed to Pitt as well. There was defensive end Maverick Gracio from Florida. Steel Valley defensive back Cruz Brookins from the local area, and then California wide receiver Israel Polk, who was a recent offer. All 3 were really sort of recent offers. Brookins got his offer in late November. Gracio was re-offered in early December, and Polk just got his offer like a week ago. and pretty much had a quick turnaround to get out here for an official visit and commit. We'll talk about those guys a lot as their commitments become public, and as we move through this week. We've touched on them briefly before, and sort of if you want to look smart to your friends, here's the things you want to say. Gracio was a defensive end from Florida who's been on Pitt's priority board for a long time. Charlie Partridge, whose respect I think, or who has, I think, earned all of our respect, right? Or respect from all of us, I guess would be the best way to say it. Charlie Partridge went to bat for this guy. In recruiting terms, he stood on the table for Maverick Gracio to get an offer. And he, obviously it came through and happened, because I think Pat Narduzzi even realizes if Charlie Partridge is going to stand up for this guy and say, I believe this kid needs to be here, then I'm going to take his word for it. That's the short story on him. Cruz Brookins is a local prospect. I think the staff has liked him for a long time. They've had him on campus a bunch of times. And I think once they ended up with some openings in their defensive back spots in their recruiting class, he was one of the first guys they moved on. And I think Brookins was always looking, hoping to end up at Pitt. And he finally got that offer and moved on it pretty quick, even though he had been committed to Kent State. And then Israel Polk is a guy who plays for St. John Bosco in California. I think the number one team in the country, according to USA Today's high school football rankings. He's the leading receiver on that team, which tells you a lot about his potential and ability, that he's playing at that high of a level of football. And so you take that and, you turn on the film, he looks like he can make a lot of plays. He looks pretty explosive. So those are the quick bullet points if you want to impress people. One guy Charlie Partridge stood on the table for. Say that. That'll really impress people if you say stood on the table. People will be like, ooh, this guy knows what he's talking about. He's saying things like he stood on the table. The next guy is a local standout. And you always like to get the locals. And he's a guy that I think the Pitt staff believes can be that next really good to great whip-field defensive back at Pitt. And then the other guy plays for the number one high school football team in the country. He's the leading receiver for the number one high school football team in the country. Those are the three quick bullet points to impress all your friends today as you start the week, courtesy of the Morning Pitt. Now, there wasn't all good news this weekend. We'll get back to some good news, but it wasn't all good news. And of course, one part of it was Brandon Hill announcing that he is not going to play anymore at Pitt. Well, he's not going to play any more college football at all. He's skipping the Sun Bowl. He's going to get ready to go to the NFL draft. Hill was a redshirt junior this year. In theory, he could play 2 more seasons. Could have played in 2023 and 2024. He's opting to move on, and quite frankly, I think he'll be a good NFL player. I think he could have benefited from another year in college. I think there are things he could have shown. I think he could have improved his draft status. I think he'll have a good NFL career, but he probably could have gotten drafted a little bit higher than he'll ultimately end up getting drafted if he had come back for another year. Here's the thing I'll always remember about Brandon Hill. And this is the thing that always stand out to me, and I'll always remember about it. And he made a lot of plays over the course of his career. After he moved into just over the last 2 seasons, he had 145 tackles and 2 interceptions, 10 pass breakups, 2 fumble recoveries. He made a lot of plays. And he played that boundary safety position, which is a playmaker's position. There are some spots on this defense that if you get the right guy in that position, he's going to make a lot of plays. But the thing I always remember about Brandon Hill is the midpoint of the 2020 season, COVID year, right? Everything's upside down. Nothing makes sense. Everything's kind of screwy, right? And so midseason, they get blown out by Notre Dame at home. You remember this. And they had a bye week after that. And in the midst of that bye week, Paris Ford leaves the team. Paris Ford starting boundary safety, a guy coming off an all-conference performance in 2019, had high expectations, wasn't happy with what was going on, decided he was going to leave the team to start preparing for the NFL draft, efforts that were potentially wasted as he went undrafted. But nevertheless, that's a side story. Ford was gone. They needed a new boundary safety to step in. Brandon Hill stepped in. And he stepped in to start the game at Florida State, which is Pitt's next game after that off week. And I think it was on Florida State's first drive, and I should have looked it up for the details. Florida State's quarterback had a long run. I forget if it went for a touchdown or just like a 60-yard run or something. And Brandon Hill, very noticeably, missed the tackle on that play. And actually, if you go back through our archives here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, you scroll back probably 2 months or so, we actually had an interview. We had Brandon Hill as a guest on the Morning Pitt. And I asked him about this. I was like, look, man, your first game as a starter, you blew a tackle on a long run by the quarterback. And he's like, yes, I did. But then he came back in that game, and he had a pick six. Pitt ended up winning the game, not necessarily because of the pick six, but it was a huge play. And he said, yeah, I absolutely do remember that. And he was down on himself for missing the tackle, but he got right back up and he made the play. And that story always sticks with me because of the resilience that Brandon Hill showed in that spot. His first start, he's taken over for a guy who had built quite a reputation, and not just among ACC officials, but he built quite a reputation around here. And he's stepping in for that guy, who's a guy whose departure at the time sort of felt like it symbolized all that was wrong with Pitt's crumbling football program. Yes, those really were the takes at that time. If you recall that off week between the Notre Dame game and the Florida State game, the entirety of Pitt football was crumbling, with the latest disaster coming not just from the blowout loss to Notre Dame, but from Paris Ford's decision to leave the team. And so in steps Brandon Hill, and on like Florida State's first drive, he misses a tackle and gives up a huge play. It's all just crumbling. The whole world is falling apart. And in classic fashion, as so often happens when we make grand declarations and determinations in the first quarter of a game or on the first drive of a game, sometimes things go a different way. And they went a different way. And they went a different way for Pitt, and they went a different way for Brandon Hill. And they ended up being a key piece of the ACC championship team last year. 78 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 2 interceptions, 8 passes broken up, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery. A huge performance, a huge season, one of the team leaders. I think probably one of the most well-liked guys on the team. I can't imagine there are many players on that team who don't like Brandon Hill. They'll be disappointed to see him go, and rightfully so. He's been a great player for Pitt in his 2 years as a starting boundary safety. And again, that's a playmaker's spot. Donovan McMillan is coming in here to play that position. And I think it's because it is a playmaker's position. And you put the right guy in that position, and you're going to get plays made. And Brandon Hill made plays. So good luck to him. It's been fun watching his career. He's done a great job at Pitt, and I think he'll have a good NFL career. And then the other thing, there was basketball. Saturday afternoon, Pitt closed the non-conference schedule by blowing out North Florida 82-56. And there's all kinds of sort of individual things. Fede Federico had 22 points and 8 rebounds, another big game for him. Greg Elliott put up a double-double with 11 and 10. Blake Hinson scored 18, went 8 of 11 from the floor. Blake Hinson scored 18 and didn't even hit a three-pointer, which I think is huge because the three-pointers will come with him. So if he has a game where he still puts up 18, shoots a high percentage, grabs 6 rebounds and gets all of it without making any threes, that's a positive development. Jamarius Burton comes back after the knee inflammation, played just 20 minutes, but scored 13 points. Nelly Cummings puts up 7 assists and only 3 turnovers. Another solid game for him, playing 30 minutes. There's a lot of individual storylines, but the thing, it really comes back to this for me, is that they're coming out of the non-conference play, and they'll go to Syracuse on Tuesday night to open ACC play. They're coming out of non-conference play doing just about everything you would want them to do. They're playing about as well as they possibly could. The only thing that's missing, and the only thing that continues to be missing, is John Hughley. Hughley didn't play on Saturday due to personal reasons. Jeff Capel said he's not sure if Hughley will play against Syracuse. We'll find out. But right now, this team is doing just about everything you would want it to be doing coming out of non-conference play. They've just been, and I think sort of steadily improving. When they've had some rough patches, when they've had some losses, when they've had some weaknesses showing, so to speak, I feel like they've corrected them and gotten more on track. And you can look at they had the 3-game losing streak. They had the West Virginia and Michigan and VCU losses. Oh boy, they looked like they were really struggling. Well, yeah, John Hughley still wasn't back. More importantly, Nelly Cummings wasn't settled in. Some of the other new guys weren't really settled in. Now, 12 games in, I think those guys are settled in, and they seem to be playing really well. And the emergence of Federico has been great over the last 2 games. A double-double in the game against Sacred Heart, and then he scores 22 against North Florida. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that in ACC games. I don't think he's going to be able to do that in ACC games, but I mean, it sure doesn't hurt if you're doing that against the non-conference. You've at least got a chance that you're going to be able to provide meaningful minutes. I mean, I was going to say off the bench, but we don't know when John Hughley is going to return to the starting lineup. We don't know when he's going to return to the lineup, period. So in the meantime, you're going to have to ride with Federico. And even if Hughley is available, he might still come off the bench. So you're still going to need Feddy to be the guy. But I'm really impressed with Nelly Cummings' development. I'm really impressed with how Jamarius Burton has played this year. I'm impressed with how Nike Sabandi has broken out a little bit. Blake Hinson continues to impress. Greg Elliott's settled in as a shooter. They've got, those 5 guys. Did I just name 5? Cummings, Burton, Sabandi. Hinson, Elliott. Those 5 guys are playing at a really high level right now. And this game on Tuesday night, we'll probably talk about it more tomorrow on the Morning Pit, is going to be such an interesting test. Because I look at it, and we know what you have to do to beat Syracuse's zone. You have to shoot, and you have to be able to make shots from basically from the foul line. Jump shots from the middle of the zone. You have to shoot them out of the zone from outside, and you have to bust it up from the middle with the jump shots from the foul line. And this Pitt team, if they're on, you can have an off night, you can have a cold night, you have nights when the shots don't fall, but if they're on, this Pitt team does those things. They have the outside shooting with Elliott for certain, Hinson, Cummings can make some shots, Burton can make some shots, Sabandi can make some shots, and then they've got those zone busters in the middle. I think Blake Hinson can do that role really well. Jamarius Burton, there's nothing I love as much as Jamarius Burton loves taking mid-range jumpers, and nailing them, knocking them down. At this point, I don't even sort of hesitate when he pulls up for one. I'm pretty sure it's going to go in because that's what he does. And I think it's going to be a little tougher for him to dribble into that spot. They're going to need plays that are drawn up to get the ball to Burton in those spots, passes over the zone or through the zone to get him those kinds of shots. Same thing with Hinson. I think Burton likes to drive in and pull up. I don't know if he's going to have as many opportunities to do that against the zone, but those guys can make the shots. And so Jeff Capel's going to need to have those plays ready to go for Hinson, for Burton, to get those shots. And then the outside stuff for Hinson, Elliott, really all the guards, because they can all shoot. Elliott's your main guy you want to focus on getting shots for, followed by Hinson, but they can all knock some down. So there's a lot that I think is really interesting going into this game against Syracuse tomorrow night. Like I said, we'll talk about it more tomorrow on the Morning Pit. But 8-4 coming out of the non-conference. I forget what I predicted. Probably 9-3. So they might have had a loss in there that I didn't anticipate or I didn't count on. I thought they maybe VCU. I thought they would beat VCU. I don't know if I thought they would beat VCU because I don't know if we knew they would play VCU at that point. But 8-4, as many people pointed out, they didn't lose a bye game. They didn't have that, St. Francis loss. And I think they're coming out of the non-conference playing about as well as you would reasonably expect them to play. And that's all encouraging. You know what I mean? I think that's really, like I say, I think it's really encouraging. And I'm very interested to see how they do here. I think a lot of people are. Because there's a chance. When you see what's happening around the ACC, you look at how Pitt's playing, and maybe more importantly, not just how they're playing, but how they're built. How they're built to play if they're playing well. And you say, they could win a few games here. They could. But we'll find out tomorrow night when it all gets started at the Dome against Syracuse. All right, it was quite a weekend. There was a lot going on in this, and really the last 2 weeks have been super busy. I don't see any reason why this week won't be as well. National Letter of Intent Signing Day on Wednesday. That's the big one. We're looking forward to that. We'll also be talking to Pat Narduzzi today after practice in the South Side. We'll look for personnel notes and developments and things like that. So, yeah, it's going to be a busy week. There's going to be a lot going on, and we'll have lots of news all at Panther-Lair.com. So stay tuned to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. And believe me, we are going all day, every day there, particularly with the message boards. They are lively. Panther-Lair.com. Make sure while you're here, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you had a great weekend. It's the holiday week. It's the countdown. It's not even the countdown to Saturday or Sunday. It's a countdown to signing day. And then after that, we'll start talking about the holidays. But for right now, we're counting down to signing day. So make sure you keep it tuned in right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com for all the Pitt sports news heading into signing day. I hope you had a great weekend. Hope you have a good Monday. And we will talk to you again tomorrow morning for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.